Let's talk about the sponsor gifts that Haymitch sends Katniss in the first Hunger Games. In the books, there are no notes that come with the gifts, and so Katniss has to understand what Haymitch is saying by what he does or does not send to her at each moment. Obviously, in the movies, it is clear that Haymitch and Katniss have an understanding that nobody else really gets, but in the books, this is even more clear. Within Katniss's first day in the game, she becomes severely dehydrated because she doesn't know where to find a water source. In fact, at one point, Katniss becomes so desperate for water that she calls out for it to try to entice Haymitch into sending her some. Haymitch doesn't send her any, and then Katniss has to understand why. To quote the book, a small voice in the back of my head whispers an answer. Maybe he's sending a message, it says. A message saying what? Then I know. There's only one good reason that Haymitch could be withholding water from me, because he knows I've almost found it. And Katniss had almost found it. And that's just the first example of them understanding each other without communicating whatsoever. Then, as we all know, Haymitch sends Katniss burn ointment after she gets burnt, which doesn't really have a message besides, feel better. The next sponsor gift that Haymitch sends is very shortly after Katniss finds Peeta. Katniss patches up Peeta to the best of her abilities, and he won't stop talking about dying, so she kisses him. When she steps outside, she finds another parachute and a hot broth. To quote the book, Haymitch couldn't be sending me a clearer message. One kiss equals one pot of broth. I can almost hear his snarl. You're supposed to be in love, sweetheart. The boy's dying. Give me something I can work with. And he's right. If I want to keep Peeta alive, I've got to give the audience something more to care about. Once again, them communicating without any words ever being said. And Katniss has to constantly remind herself at this point that they need to be acting like star-crossed lovers so that she can get more sponsor gifts. Not long after, the feast is announced. And Peeta refuses to let Katniss go by herself. Katniss knows they need to go so that Peeta can get better, but he says that he will drag himself and he will probably die. That's when Haymitch sends Katniss sleep syrup. At first, Katniss thinks it's medicine to help Peeta, but that would be much too expensive at this point in the games. This is Haymitch's way of telling Katniss that he thinks it's a good idea for her to go to the feast. He's also telling her that to do that, she needs to knock out Peeta, which she does. Peeta is unaware that Katniss and Haymitch are communicating like this. In fact, at one point, they're talking about Thresh and how it actually looks like he's gained weight in the games, and Peeta says something about him having really good sponsors, and he wonders what they have to do to get sponsor gifts from Haymitch. Katniss goes on to think, I remember he doesn't know about the message Haymitch sent us a couple of nights ago. One kiss equals one pot of broth. It's not the sort of thing that I can blurt out either. Katniss then plays into them being star-crossed lovers because she would like another sponsor gift. The next few days are very rainy, and both of them are starving in the cave. They have kissed once or twice, and Katniss realized that kissing is not enough to get them sponsor gifts anymore, so she decides they need to ramp up the romance. They're having a conversation, and Peeta says, well, I don't have much competition here. Katniss wants to draw away from the conversation, but she can almost hear Haymitch in her ear saying, say it, say it. So, she says, you don't have much competition anywhere. And then they receive another sponsor gift. At this point, they've received an entire feast of fresh rolls, goat cheese, apples, and a tureen of lamb stew on wild rice. Peeta, who is still unaware of all that's happening, says, I guess Haymitch finally got tired of watching us starve. Katniss says, I guess so. But in her head, she can hear Haymitch's smug, if slightly exasperated words, yes, that's what I'm looking for, sweetheart. Now, it becomes clear that Haymitch and Katniss are communicating in this way throughout the entire game. And it's clear in the movies that they have a much different relationship than Haymitch and Peeta do, but the movies don't really get into why they have this relationship. And I think the main reason is because they are from the same part of District 12. Peeta, being from town, has never really struggled the way that Haymitch and Katniss would have. Because Haymitch and Katniss are both from the Seam, and in fact, they're described as having the same features in the books. And to be fair, everyone from the Seam somewhat shares the same features. I mean, Gale and Katniss look a lot alike as well, which is why they're able to say Gale is Katniss's cousin. But because both of these characters have struggled in the same way, they have an innate understanding of one another that Peeta just doesn't get. And their relationship and how they work together in the books is just so interesting to me, and it's actually one of my favorite aspects of reading them. And although I think that the movies are fantastic adaptations to the books, I wish things like this had been a bit more obvious. Obviously, I'm aware that this would be very hard to portray because it's all Katniss's inner monologue. All in all, Katniss and Haymitch's relationship is one of my favorite parts of the books, and I love talking about it. Let me know what you guys want to hear about next.